Welcome back to the Gold Club World Cup, and we are into the last bits and pieces now of this stage, the last two matches of Group B, and with me to guide everybody through those is Galen. How are you doing, Galen?
I'm doing really well. This is going to be an exciting matchup, and it actually features one of my favorite Chinese players that I've ever met in my Hearthstone career. Yu Ying, playing for Lucky Future, is I've had the chance to talk with him for 2 hours during a Moscow layover where he was going to China, I was going to the United States, and we had an entire conversation through Google Translate. So we sat there for 2 hours, not understanding a lick of what the other person was saying, except for what Google Translate was putting out. But we had a great conversation about the future of GM, future of the Gold Series, and just like Hearthstone in general. So I'm really excited to see Yu Ying play today. But there's a bunch of other strong players in this lower bracket match that we have going on.
Yeah, indeed. Starting off with Lucky Future, I suppose, because we know a bit about G2 already. They've got Yu Ying, as you see there, but they also have Blue and Zhou Yang, whose name I've just butchered, both of whom have been playing very well all season long. Blue making a bit of a name for himself, that I know at least, for writing deck guides and such like about Warrior, which he described as boring but essential.
Yeah, I mean, these are some names that for the Western audiences are probably not nearly as familiar. Even Yu Ying, who's appeared at Worlds, we don't get a chance to see him at very many tournaments. This is like a really good opportunity to see what they have in store for us. And you probably have some of the most experience with Chinese players so far, since you actually solo casted a bunch of like the preliminary matches for the Gold Club World Cup.
Yeah, and some of those, I flew a little bit blind at the start and just kept going with it. So they got better as they went along, and I learned more as I went along, kind of as it should be, learned along with the viewers. As you see that the team there, Reconnect, is on the team, but the first three we'll see a lot more of, I think. Yeah. And it's been interesting to see, because when you know nothing about a player or very little, and you've got no bias, it can be quite hard to actually judge based on one or two matches actually how good they are. I was talking earlier about Love, who I always felt was a mediocre player. And when we saw his ratings come up, because I thought he played really well this year, but in 2015, 2016, I was surprised he was still playing Hearthstone now. We saw his rating come up, and it turns out that his micro is not very good. Well, if you watch somebody twice ever and they make two micro mistakes, you just assume they're rubbish. Like,
yeah,
you try not to.
Sorry, go ahead.
No, you speak. I was just saying that you try not to think they're rubbish, but that's you judge on micro when you see somebody twice.
Yeah. I mean, there's also a little bit of bias against unknown players. Like if we have Tice versus an unknown player, obviously if Tice makes something that you might consider a slip up, you might say, oh, it's Tice. He actually has this all mapped out. But if it's a player you've never heard the name of before, then you'll be like, oh, this person doesn't know what they're doing. They messed up. Now they're going to lose the game because of it. There definitely is a bias there when you don't know and don't respect the player enough. And tournaments like these are great because a lot of times there's a lot of that unknown player bias against Chinese players because we really are isolated from the Chinese Gold Series circuit. So getting a chance to see a bunch of matches, a bunch of games where these players can show what they've got, I think is really going to help change and shift that narrative in the future.
Yeah, and I can tell you from what I have seen doing the commentaries on the whole of the Gold Team Championship, that the Chinese players have got a lot better than what we associate with them with. I know they have the world champion, and I know they had a pretty good 2019 in general and in Masters tours and stuff, and people like Ranlit do put us right on that occasionally. But in terms of what we see day in, day out, we still haven't seen China at their best. This is a great chance to showcase that.
Yeah, I mean, I definitely agree with you about the whole Master Tour system. France is obviously the dominant region. There's no contesting that, France is by far the best country in the world right now. But I think you can make an argument that China is in second or third. They're way up there in terms of results and player skill right now. So, just reiterating, tournaments like these are fantastic. I love seeing names that I don't get a chance to normally see. Yu Ying in particular, I'm really excited for. But we're going to have a lot of exciting matches today and until Sunday when the finals actually happen. So for right now, we are playing the losers elimination match between G2 and Lucky Future. G2 will be having ties up first on their Dragon Spell Druid against Lucky Future's Priest. Lorinda, how do you feel about this matchup?
Personally, I think that the priest can get it done. I think it has to withstand some troublesome times sometimes, and sometimes just straight up can't deal with stuff. But talking on the actual percentages, my instinct is, especially since the nerfs, that priest gets it done. Do you agree?
Well, we were talking about this before the broadcast, and I said that if
You're not
the
supposed to
Druid
tell
draws Overgrowth, they're pretty darn favored in the series, and it's kind of sad that a lot of like Druid matchups are like, yeah, if they draw Overgrowth, they win. And if they don't, they're gonna have a really strong, like, tough time to win that matchup. But to be fair, I think they have slightly more time to draw an Overgrowth against Priest than they normally do against something like Demon Hunter.
Just going to stop you for a second looking at that #1 career prize earnings. That is correct. He has won more money than any other Hearthstone player, nearly $500,000.
So,
and then he streams a little bit as well.
Just looking at this, it seems like Tyze has won 40 times the amount that Blue has had in this, just based off that graphic alone. And yeah, it's no surprise that Tyze is a 5 on experience. Easily the most experienced Hearthstone player in the world, just in terms of like raw amount of finals he's been in, of championships he's placed in, of tournament wins. And yeah, Blue still has a lot of experience, just not the same as Tyze.
I'm going to say, though, that Tice there has a really low tech rating, and it's my fault. Dragging those averages down, because I feel that he doesn't... His deck building's fine. To grab and go. He grabs a deck, and he goes and wins with it.
Yeah, I mean, well, you gave him a 0 out of 5. We had to do a scaling of 1 to 5, and you gave a 0 for Tice, for tech, which I think is... I think it's definitely too low, and you probably meant it to be too low, but it's still like an interesting talking point where, you know, Tice does often rely on the decks from other players. He relies on decks from Casey and Bunnyhopper or RDU, and I'm sure that he spends a lot of time practicing himself, but there is that element of relying on other players to figure out what's good and what's not, and that might cost him some percentage in tournaments.
And to be clear, that's not because he can't tech, it's because he doesn't have the time to tech. If you put him in a room and say build some new decks and tech them out, and you can't stream, and this is the important tournament of your life, he would be fine. I'm going on what he actually has time to do. Just to be absolutely clear there, because Tyze is an absolute beast at this game.
There's also another card that we failed to mention when talking about Druid hands, and that is Breath of Dreams with a Druid with a dragon in hand. And Tyze has both of those cards, so advantage Tyze right now by quite a bit, at least in my mind.
Yep, everything looking pretty good for him there, but we'll see. Blue's got plenty going on. At least he's not going to die earlier. He gets some sort of, I was going to call it beatdown. That's really excessively exaggerated, but get something going on at least. Maybe he'll get something good from the Thought Steal to catch up.
I think a really big interesting talking point just happened where Tyce coined out the Breath of Dreams. Now, you might be thinking, okay, I need to save this coin because I have a bunch of expensive cards in hand. And there's a card that I just want to talk about really quickly. Overgrowth is part of what I'm trying to say. If Tyce goes coin Breath of Dreams, he gets to go Fungal Fortunes the following turn, and then instead of having just a couple draws to find the Overgrowth on turn 4, he actually has like 3 draws. 3 extra draws. So while sometimes he sacrifices the chance to play an Emerald Explorer or an Exotic Mount Solar a turn early, it vastly increased the consistency of his overall game plan in my mind.
I'm just staring at this board, seeing how far ahead he actually is.
It seems like Blue is dead. I don't mean to say that.
Really
like,
really interesting to me. In the Gold Team Championship, a lot of the priests were playing mind games for this matchup, and that made a massive difference because Druid was brought every single match, every single week, pretty much. So you could safely bring in mind games. They haven't got it in this deck today, which is one of their few outs right now.
Well, it seems like Priest's game plan against Druid a lot of times has just been using their own cards against them. Even like back when the first initial Kael'thas Druid lists were around, a lot of times the Priest game plan was to Soul Mirror the Kael'thas, play another cheap spell, and then Plague of Death. And that was like a blowout every single time it happened.
Yeah, it turns out if you play a deck with rubbish cards, you need to steal the good cards decks. That's Priest's way. As long as I've been playing Hearthstone, apart from a brief period where Razakus was a really great deck.
I mean, Druid has a lot of rubbish cards in it too. They're both playing with a bunch of rubbish cards. I don't think that's pretty specific.
Oh my. He's actually generating at least something to do here. Obviously, you can see from his face that he's not very excited about it, but he'll be less excited about it in a minute when he sees this next turn.
Tice does have like still a little bit of an awkward hand just because you really only get 2 minions here, and you have to ask, is that enough? Like Shadow Word Death means that it's very likely that the board right now will just trade over. Like if Tice had a Crystal Power as well. Okay, well never mind. He gets to clear the Dragon Ball Overseer. He got the Rush minion.
Yeah, he was actually going to struggle a little bit if he rolled badly there, because this Savage Roar is going to do a lot, especially in conjunction with a Pyro if he wants it.
Yeah, and just the Shadow Word Death for the exotic Mount Seller. There's a lot of ways to efficiently answer this specific board state. Good news for Tice, though. He does find the Rush minion. Makes it a lot easier for him for the next couple turns.
It does. I'm really annoyed at myself for not having the Rush minions from Druid odds up. It's about 20%, I seem to remember, but from 2 rolls. But Blue having that second Shadow Word Death is going to give him a little bit of time now to at least get a foothold in this game.
He does get a little bit of time, but looking at the mana that they have to spend, Blue has 5 and Tice has 8. So I really don't see a world where that's going to last for much longer, where Blue is going to keep up with what Tice is doing.
Well, he's got Glowflies for 4 in some worlds next turn.
Is that enough, Lorinda?
No, but then he has other things the turn after. Maybe. So what turn does Blue need to get to and still have some sort of sensible control of the board to have a chance here?
I'm thinking like turn 7, turn 8, turn 9 are the turns where Blue will need to recapitalize on what's happening.
Because I'm not disagreeing with you. I can see that Tice is miles in front, but in terms of looking at what could happen, you can see there's a making of some semblance of a hand there with Glowflies into Savage Roar to clear again, gets you that step closer to Asira.
Yeah, but it's Priest and not Druid. Glowfly Swarm right now is only summoning 3 2/2s, which is, it's not that powerful of a card. And, even if he doesn't top deck a spell next turn, it's still only summoning 3.
Yeah. Yeah, 3's not enough. I'm hoping for 4, even 5. And obviously, since I started that, there's already been a shield picked up, which is not a spell. And Priest is a pretty minion-heavy deck these days.
Tice does have the option to go Glowfly Swarm here, and I don't think he's really relying on that to win. I think this is just supposed to be enough pressure to make Blue have to be on the back foot for the next turn instead of playing for tempo. And yeah, that's exactly what Tice does. This board is not needed to win the game. Sometimes you need to save Glowfly Swarms. Sorry, go ahead.
No, if you spend 3 mana clearing this board, you've spent 6 mana clearing this board, basically.
Right. That's exactly what I'm trying to say. The threat of it alone means that Blue's next turn is totally botched in terms of playing for tempo. He has to play defensively if he wants to keep Tice off board.
And the ways to do that are not much fun. They do exist. Pyromancer and a couple of spells. You can't even play one of the spells. You wouldn't want a Savage Roar. Yeah, it's actually really, really horrible, isn't it?
It's the only play he's got. Savage Roar, like you're saying, and then renew afterwards. You could renew first in the hopes of trying to find a different spell to play, but I don't really think it gets the job done.
Sure. I wonder if that was a situation where maybe he just plays Shield of Galakron, and if he dies, he loses because he's going to get overrun.
Maybe. At the same time, I think that Tice kind of just gets to freely develop into that, and then Blue would be even further behind. Blue might be facing down something like a Soul of the Forest the next turn. Instead of needing 2 spells to clear, he needs 4. And with 7 mana, and you need to play the Wild Pyromancer, and you need to have 4 spells to play, that's pretty darn unlikely.
Yep. No, not really disputing it. It was pretty grim, and this is still pretty grim.
I'm not sure about that. The Shadowboard Death comes down.
Death
This might be the
Madness.
turn to develop the Shield of Galakron. And Tice
If anyone draws cards, right, he gets the 1-drops out of his deck. Has he got any left? If he Shadow Madnesses?
I'm not positive. I know that the Shadowboard Death is going to come down this turn. Innervate might be useful next turn to play the Ysera. It does surprise me, though, that he decides to go for this instead of just playing the Shield of Galakron. I feel like that was a pretty easy way to spend 7 mana. You play defensive the entire turn, and so in Blue's case, he played a 1/2 and healed his face for 1 and Thought Stealed instead of playing a 4/5 with Taunt. That just seems like less tempo, and tempo is what you need to beat Druid. So I don't like what Blue just did here. I think that having a 4/5 is just bigger than a 1/2. That's like,
because his health total is irrelevant, right? Is what you're trying to say. Because when you die to Druid, you take as many as you like in the turn anyway, basically.
well, yeah, sure, that's part of it. The health total is pretty irrelevant here, but the board state is very relevant. That's like the only relevant thing against Druid, is trying to play for as much stuff on board as possible. I don't really think Blue capitalized as well as he could have there.
Yeah, we saw some games yesterday where healing face every turn was correct because you're against a totally different deck archetype, and it's okay to keep healing up. But yeah, this one you just want stuff on the board, otherwise you run out of removal spells. You need your minions to act as removal spells as well as your removal spells.
Couple things to note here. From Ty's perspective, he decides to go for Overflow instead of the Emerald Drake plus Soul of the Forest. Secondly, I imagine that, like, in Tice's mind, I think he's just looking for the second Glowfly Swarm, maybe, to just lock up the board with the Soul of the Forest as well. But maybe that was an opportunity for Tice to actually still meaningfully develop instead of just playing the Overflow. Tice's follow-up would just be whatever dragon he gets off of the Emerald Explorer. And if that doesn't work, he just goes for, a Savage Roar to just kill Blue instantly.
Mm-hmm. Now, having the double prime is really going to help Tice. I wonder if Blue could find a way to actually get the second Zixel Prime on his side. Something he could have been looking to try and do, just to have some sort of out, like top deck it and kill your opponent seemed like a way to try and win the Hearthstone game.
I believe from Tice's perspective, the only card that's scary right now would be the Soul Mirror. I'm not really sure if you can get a read that Blue doesn't have it in hand just yet. If Tice did have that read, then something like this, where you play the Zixor Prime plus the Power of the Wild, double value trade the 4/9, and just push not 7 but 9 damage face, setting up for a Savage Roar to be way more than enough to kill the following turn, is probably the play. Even against something like Soul Mirror, if you take a look at this, there would still be 5 damage in play, and then there would be another 12 from the Savage Roars, with another 2 from the Hero Power and the Moonfire, and the opponent would be going Soul Mirror plus Heal, so they're at 19. So that would be 5 plus 6 plus 6 plus 2, which is 19, which is exact lethal. So Ty's actually just mapped this out pretty brilliantly, I would say.
It happens to, like, sometimes if you cast 2 random players and you see that one happens to have lethal the next turn, you go, okay, that was nice, that was lucky. But it happens when Ty's plays all the time, which means it's not lucky, it means he's actually doing that math.
I'm positive that Ty's has mapped this one out. That being said, I believe that Blue still has a ton of chances to win this game. Access to a activated Breath of the Infinite means that he won't damage his Wild Pyromancer. He gets the heal on the Pyro. And almost everything is going to actually die. Everything dies. Excuse me.
And he gets the Zixel Prime on his side, which is something I was talking about that might give him extra ways to get into this.
That was really critical for Blue, but Tice manages to find the second Glowfly Swarm, so that's just another board state. Tice's like, yep, okay, this is fine.
I mean, he has only got 6 cards left in his deck. It's allowed.
I think that Tice had a mini heart attack just based off the fact that there really wasn't a great way to clear that board. He even had lethal through a Soul Mirror, and that was probably the card he was most concerned about. So, fact of the matter is, the second Glowfly Swarm is just way more than enough to lock out this game. Can blue
And he
find a
knows it.
dragon that wins from this spot?
A dragon that wins from this spot.
Hey, there's a Brightwing, and maybe all 18 cards are not duplicates, so you go Brightwing for a Zephyrs for a Frost Nova?
Okay. Sure.
That happens most of the time, I would say. It's a high percentage out.
Yeah, I like it when I do that every 2 games or so. It's great. Assume this is
Lorinda,
lethal.
it's exact lethal.
This can't be exactly. This must be miles more than exact lethal.
No, it looks exact to me.
It's
Brilliant,
exactly something.
Brilliantly mapped out by Tice. That's close enough.
Calculated it to the exact point of damage with only about 25 left over. And G2 take a nice 1-0 lead.
Yeah, I mean, that kind of shows the power of Spell Druid. When you draw the ramp cards and you draw the Fungal Fortunes, go into your power plays, there's really not much you can do to stop that. That being said, props to Tice. The coin Breath of Dreams on turn 1, I think, was really smart based on the fact that he had Fungal Fortunes in hand as well. I don't think it actually would have mattered too much if he had saved it, because he did manage to top it with the Overgrowth. But overall, that sequencing makes a lot of sense, and I think makes it much more consistent that he wins that game. So, yep, Tyson had a great hand, but I think he played it superbly. And that's not to discredit Blue either. I think that Blue's clear on the one turn where he had the Wild Pyromancer, plus the heal, plus the Shadow Madness was a really good idea. Maybe a little bit sloppy with the Disciple of Galakron over Shield of Galakron play in the mid game, but I really don't think it would have changed much. There's not much you can do to stop that strong of a Druid opening.
Yeah, sometimes you just get Druided, and that's the end of it. Lion lost one of the games to Lee in the team league just by 3. You've seen that match, I think.
It was
3 games in a row. She just got
series.
a Druid in the face. Like, it was just ridiculous.
Yeah, it was a 15-minute series. Every single game, Lee went Overgrowth on turn 3 and then played Glowfly Swarm, and yeah, that was good game. So I guess we'll be seeing a lot more of it potentially if Tice keeps managing to win with this Dragon Spell Druid.
However, winning with it against a last hero standing lineup of 10 decks isn't as easy as it is against maybe a Conquest lineup or a last hero lineup with one ban that's been ruined. So plenty going on here. Demon Hunter has been banned for Lucky Future, but they still have the Paladins and the Shamans of this world, which weirdly turn into weapons in this format somehow.
Can I ask you about that? Because I think that Demon Hunter might still be up. Based off of the info that I had written down, it seems like G2 banned Warrior, Rogue, Warlock, and Hunter, and I think Demon Hunter is actually
wrong
still
way
up.
around. Good call.
Okay.
So, yeah.
With that in mind, I think this is just specifically
Demon
important
Hunter, then.
because Demon Hunter is probably the strongest deck that you can queue back into Druid. Stats at one point had it like 70-30 for Demon Hunter, which is not one.
I don't know who the 30 were.
It's not
How
the
did
most
they ever win
polarized.
games?
It's not the most polarized matchup in the game, but it's pretty darn up there. So definitely recommend Lucky Future to queue Demon Hunter in this next match.
Yeah, if it's available and you play it, it's simple as that. Let's have a look if they've got any weirdness. They've got one Kobold Spellkin, which is not that weird anymore. They've got a Horde Pillager. Just checking they're not playing the control variant. They are not. They've just got...
I believe they might be. They have Mctheridin, Chaos Nova,
yeah, they
Cobalt
have
Spellkin, Soul Cleave. It's just a very weird version of it. They have a couple cards that we did not see earlier. They have 2 Volpera Scoundrels, which did not show up, I believe, in the previous list that we saw yesterday.
That changes quite a bit because this Demon Hunter deck, now we understand why it's not been banned, because I don't think this deck's that great unless it's in Eddie's hands. Now, I know you play with Eddie quite often, so you're going to disagree with me heartily here, I suspect.
Well, first off, I just want to apologize for saying that aggro DH is probably the queue. I think that's changes a lot. However, I still think that control DH has a lot of game versus Spell Druid, just based on the fact that they have Chaos Nova, they have Mctheridon, they have Immolation Aura. So even still, this might actually be just a stronger queue than normal aggressive Demon Hunter into a Spell Druid.
probably have a look at that. Just having a look at Zhou. He's got career earnings of $29,000, and we've not really seen much of him. So it just shows how little we see of the meta. Although, looking at the strengths there from the Chinese casters who have rated him, quite low ratings there for him. But then we are looking in comparison to ties, so they're going to be.
It's hard to outmatch Tice in terms of, Hearthstone skill. That's just a very, not many people even match him. So having to be stronger than him is quite a feat, I would say.
78% apparently this Shaman on the ladder against Dragon Druid. Told you it'd be Shaman.
Yeah, you're right. I made another huge glaring error here that they have Shaman up. And of course you can Totem Shaman into Dragonspell Druid. That's just your best matchup. What am I saying today, Lorinda? I think maybe a small lack of sleep is getting to me.
Wow. How long are we into the ball? That's 20 minutes and Gala needs to go to bed already. That's ridiculous. That's you embarrassed for the rest of the day at least. But yeah, so explain why this is so good then.
The big thing to me would be that Druid just gets on board on turn 5 and turn 6, and Shaman gets on board on turn 2 and turn 3. And when Shaman gets on board, they really get on board, and there's no stopping them unless you're doing the same thing. Now, that being said, against other tempo-oriented decks, getting on board for Shaman means developing a 0-2 on turn 2. That's really easy to deal with something like Demon Hunter. However, for Druid, they actually have to spend resources and divert away from the ramp game plan to actually deal with that. If you do not check the Totemic Reflection on turn 3 by killing the totem on turn 2, you will get run over with any deck in the game right now. And Druid is the one that has to divert most of their game plan to check that 0-2 totem.
So I've played this matchup at least 0 times. But I was surprised to see Ty's full mull there with at least a Bog Beam in hand. I realise it's slow and clunky and he's got to get going, but was he just looking for Crystal Power and Ramp there? Was that be the only two things?
It's slow. Like you just said, it's slow and clunky and he's got to get going. The stats don't lie, Lorinda. When you have a 78 versus 22% matchup based off of stats on Chinese ladder, that means you need to get your good cards to win. You cannot mulligan for decent hands. Decent hands fall firmly into that 78% win rate for Shaman.
Mm-hmm. So if you're the Shaman, you just take anything that isn't rubbish, and if you're the Druid, you're trying to get the absolute nuts, because otherwise you're going to get 78%ed.
Yeah, generally in this kind of matchup, I think that's a pretty decent strategy, where if you're the one that's massively favored, keeping average hands will usually get you the win. And if you are the one that's very unfavored, you really have to go for your strongest curve possible.
Interesting, Zhou not being tempted to sort of play all of his 1-drops there, just still staying to Hearthstone principles and just using a totem, which gives him an extra minion, because the times he loses are the times that somehow he loses these minions. So just sticking along. The 2 health is obviously improvement on the 1 health of the lackey, so it can't be hero powered.
For sure.
Just being nice and sensible.
I also think that there's some merit to beaming sidekicking on the Flame Tongue totem so that it just almost always lives. And if Zhulong decides to go for the triple 1-drop play the previous turn, that means that not only is he skipping a mana this turn, he also doesn't get to land that buff on the most important minion.
Emerald Explorers, one heck of a good Hearthstone card.
Twin Tyrant is also one heck of a good Hearthstone card.
Especially when you can play it next turn.
I think that's going to be the decision point for Ties, whether he saves the Innervate for the Twin Tyrant or he just decides to go coin Crystal Power now. I imagine he would like to save the Innervate for a play the following turn. But it's a very difficult decision, because if you don't answer this 4-2, then, not only is it another minion in play for Zhulong, it's also more damage, and it's just more stuff that you have to deal with the following turn. So I can see either argument.
Yeah, and Zhulong will run out of stuff pretty rapidly. That's kind of what the deck does. So having to chew through 8 health, not ideal. And this is a tough turn for him mana-wise. After this, it gets easier because you can play a thing and Bloodlust and everything works out okay. But this is a tough turn because either you wipe out your board and don't really repopulate very well, or you bloodlust and you don't repopulate very well. Either way, not great.
I'd really like to see from the spell shaman perspective here to not play the bloodlust. I think there's a lot of spells that really cleanly answer this 4/8, and bloodlusting now seems a bit ambitious. You're missing a lot of extra damage from the Flame Tongue Totem. Sure, you're pushing 9 damage here, but at the same time, you're kind of removing your own board state. And to be honest, like, even if you let the 4/8 live for a turn, your Flame Tongue Totem is still kind of protected. It has 5 health, so if Tice wants to actually kill it, he has to use a Hero Power or a Moonfire, which may not be in his hand. If Tice is Hero Powering to kill the Flame Tongue Totem, that means that Tice is very likely not developing anything else for the rest of the turn, and then you're totally, I don't know what word to say, but chilling. You're totally chilling if Tice Hero Powers the next turn. So I think board development was way better there than just the Bloodlust play. Even though it pushed 9 damage, I don't think that's still enough to justify it.
There is a very good chance that fixes his mana curve, depending what he rips off the top of his deck, but it's likely to be a 3 mana card. That's the one he's got the most of left. It could make this turn that is taking place now, where he's actually drawn another 1. It could have really turned out nicely in terms of mana curve, just put everything on the board this turn and not waste anything as he goes.
Oh, these would have all been... I think that the Soul of the Murlocs last turn would have been an incredibly strong option, and if I was in Zholong's spot right now, I would be kicking myself for the Bloodlust play that just happened. That being said, the Soul of the Murlocs is still incredibly good this turn.
Yeah, as it turns out, the way that Tice has had to defend early on, the Mount Cellar's not its normal strong self, but that's going to give Zholong a little bit more time. Soul of the Murlocs with Bloodlust in hand is obviously something that we've all seen many times. It's just a great spot to be in. It's what Druid does to you, basically, except with Soul of the Forests.
This that hit by Zholong, just the Titanic Lackey to get the value trade, minor thing, but I think it's still really smart. Health on the spell or token shaman's minions does not matter at all. So if you can get value trades whenever possible, that's really critical. That's pretty much just dealing 4 damage to Tice's face right now.
Sure, that makes a lot of sense. And it's actually something that's changed in Hearthstone over the last year or so. Definitely a conscious change, where minions have more health than attack a lot of the time now. And so you can actually make 2-turn plans, whereas it used to be, I've got a 3-2, you've got a 2-3, who's going to trade them? But now if I've got a 3-6 and you've got a 3-5 and then neither of them have taunt, you've got to decide which one you're hitting, face or the minion. It makes a big difference now.
For sure. From Ty's perspective, the Ironbark makes a little bit of sense, but maybe from his perspective, saying that the last card is going to be the second Bloodlust is a little bit too a little bit too defensive. He
sometimes you're cornered into that.
He still decides to clear it up. Is that lethal? I believe it is.
That was my first question as well, but
you could use the Guardian Og Merchant to ping off the 1/1 that spawns off of the Sludge Slurper. You can also do this. I believe that there's a way to squeeze 1 extra damage out of this board state, but I could be wrong on that. It doesn't matter.
Exactly.
-4 versus -5, it does not matter at all. Zholong is going to clean up with that second Bloodlust. A very strong start, I would say, in terms of hand quality. The second Bloodlust just kind of demolished Tice's game plan. And, the sequencing especially mattered a lot. I'd say that landing the buff on the Flame Tongue Totem determined a lot of what happened that game. Really limited Tice's options to effectively clear the Token Shaman board. So, I still disagree with what he did with the first Bloodlust, but it ended up working out pretty fantastically in the end. So, maybe I'm the one that's wrong here. It's totally fine.
Even if you're not, let's just for the sake of argument say you're the one that's right. Just for argument, it just goes to show how important it is to know your plan. He had the plan, which is don't get the Flame Tongue killed, and the rest played itself after that. I don't think many people would have known to buff the Flame Tongue, blah blah blah. But once he got that right, everything else was just you could just play this. It just plays the hands do this thing, and whether you do it your way, whether you do it his way, you end up winning the game quite convincingly. But now they're going to pay the price for playing Shaman. Right? This is the upside is it kills the Druid 78% of the time. The downside is your next game is 1-1 and you're playing Shaman.
And not only that, you're playing Totem Shaman, which has... So when I'm thinking about Shaman lists, I think that Totem Shaman and Galakrond Shaman both have a lot of power in them. But I would say that Galakrond Shaman has a lot more choices and a lot more gameplay where, your game plan doesn't just devolve to the point where it's, I'm going to play a totem on turn 2, and if you kill it, I lose. And if you don't kill it, I win. Galakrond Shaman has a bit more than just that binary of a game plan. So I think that G2 will probably have a deck that counters this pretty effectively. Taking a look over here.
Rogue sounds good.
Rogue sounds, the thing about Rogue, though, is that a lot of times they have backstabs, but you don't really want to be backstabbing just a spell power totem on turn 2. Sure. Taking a quick look over here at the list for G2, it seems like they are running Galakrond Shaman with the Evolve package. I might be interested in queuing that up in this matchup.
And is that because you think it's going to have the best chances immediately, or you think it's got the best chance combined with holding on the third goal, the game 4 as well?
I just think that there's a lot of really strong tools against Totem Shaman. Totem Shaman is known to summon really wide board states, and they do not have Mogu Flesh Shaper. So, you're playing the kind of similar game plan that Totem Shaman is doing, but you have this trump card at the very end where, you have a 1-mana Mogu Flesh Shaper mutate, and Totem Shaman's like, oh, guess I lose to that. So, in terms of board parity, I think that Galakrond Shaman has a much easier time handling that board. Not only that, they have a bunch of rush cards to deal with early game totems. Evocation of Frost to, summon a 2-1, kill the O2 totem for free is a really good card in that matchup. They have, weapons. They have Disciple of Galakronds to clear up with multiple totems if necessary. So I wouldn't mind seeing the Shaman queue up here. However, I think there's several other decks that would still make sense.
People might be wondering why we haven't given Radu the maximum for experience. Well, there's one slightly sad factor, but also one major one. The sad one is he never made it to Worlds, despite being so close multiple times. But the other one is he didn't really do the 2018 tour at all. He sort of took that year mainly off. He played a couple of them. And sort of concentrated more on his stream and invitationals and such like since then. So his actual experience relative to all the people in this event, not relative to me, sort of came up a little bit lower than you might expect, which was an interesting thing that came out of these stats.
For sure. And I mean, you mentioned that he missed a year off competing. Normally I wouldn't ding a player too hard for that, but 2018 is, I think at this point, pretty inarguably the strongest year of competitive Hearthstone in terms of relative player skill. That was the year that Hunter Ace dominated pretty much the entire year. There's a bunch of other players that did very well. Just Saying, for example, was right on Hunter Ace's coattails, and then a bunch of other random names popping up here and there.
Yeah, this Gallon guy did quite well that year, or started to make his name as well, I hear.
I did okay, but compared to, I didn't even make 1-star master. There's a bunch of people that made 1-star master and even 2-star master, which is ridiculously impressive considering how hard it actually was to accomplish that at the time. But we're getting into game number 2 here. Game number 3, what am I saying? RDU is queuing up the Galakrond Secret Rogue versus the Totem Shaman, like you were mentioning earlier.
Yeah, and you made a mistake when you said about the backstab. You didn't know he was going to draw both of them. You said he might draw a backstab.
Sure.
But if you draw 2 backstabs, then you're in a much, much better situation.
And I mean, this actually happened before where you and Gia were arguing about Battle Mage. Okay, well, I guess it's not going to happen. I was going to make a pun here, but it's just never going to happen. It's never going to work out, Lorinda. Still, RDU has a very clean answer to this. He can decide to go backstab, and he has the ability to play an ambush. Ambush is crazy strong versus this kind of deck.
2/3s versus naught anythings that kill them. That's great.
For most decks, a 2/3 is a minor annoyance. For Totem Shaman, it's literally it's almost game over. Unfortunately, they really can't play anything that contests that cleanly.
Yeah, and the poison is super relevant as well. It's just a
Oh,
2. Yeah, it's just a
that
million
is
3.
not the totem that Zhulong wanted here. Dagger now clears this up. I think that RDU always goes for that. If there was another totem with 2 health, I imagine RDU would be pretty interested in backstabbing it, but that's like a pretty critical resource. But now, since it's just a Searing Totem, the Dagger is going to clean that up super efficiently.
Yeah, Zholang going to have to... He may even be in a spot where he has to play a minion, even though he knows it's probably an ambush, and if it's an ambush, unlucky.
Yep, I mean,
that
there's...
bad already.
Hero Power Pass does not seem like a winning play.
No, Rogue, in theory, we can see the reality is slightly different. We'll start spamming minions about now.
And to be
any
fair...
minions against you is bad.
Okay, so on the other hand, for Zholong's perspective, he does have the ability to go Magic Carpet plus a 1-drop the following turn to clear off the 2/3. So maybe his game plan now is to just, accept that it's going to be an ambush, play Magic Carpet plus Blazing Battle Mage the following turn to clear off the 2/3 pretty effectively. But, this is super interesting. That kind of goes against this entire game plan, unfortunately.
He doesn't look surprised. This is still planned. Whatever it is, whether you like it or not, this is what he This is what he was going for. There was not a flicker of emotion when that happened. So I'm curious to see his next turn, because this seems to have been something he expected to happen.
I imagine he's very interested in playing the Magic Carpet plus a 1-drop. Between the two, you could make an argument for playing the Tempest instead of the Blazing Battle Mage, just because it's a 2-attack rusher instead of a 3-attack rusher, and maybe 3-attack would be more important in the following couple turns.
Interestingly, RDU's actually out of things to do next turn. As it stands, I mean, it should pick something up. That's what Rogue's good at. But as it stands, he's actually in a relatively bad spot, weirdly, considering how great this start's been.
Zhulong is really happy to see that this is not another ambush. I think another ambush would have just totally locked up this game. Like, there's no coming back from that second poisonous minion. But since it is a Dirty Tricks, he actually can fight back for board. Oh. Well, that's a great 1-mana card to draw at this specific point in time. RDU does have the ability to just fully clear off this Magic Carpet if he so chooses. Backstab plus Dagger plus the 3/1 hit into the 1/6 does clear it off. I'm just not really sure if that's a great use of his resources, though.
Would you Shadow Step? Like, just play it, then Shadow Step it and just pass? Dagger up, obviously.
I'd be pretty interested in saving the Shadow Step just because Flick Skyshiv is a great Shadow Step target in this matchup. Normally when you think of Flick Shadow Step, you're thinking, it's going to be a tempo loss. And in most matchups, that is the case where, you need to have the 4/4 in play. And otherwise, like, your opponent is going to run over the board state. However, Totem Shaman is not like most Hearthstone decks right now in the format. They are not an infinite value generating engine. So you can go back to that, 2014, 2015 style of Hearthstone where Assassinate is a very powerful card. We don't normally see that, but in this kind of matchup, where you're playing against a pretty linear deck, almost a one-trick pony sort of game plan, that Shadow Step becomes a lot more effective in combination with Flick than we normally see in current Hearthstone games.
And we are going to get to see it take place. We're also going to see the downside, if you like, of keeping up the card that it gets traded into, but obviously it's a tiny price to pay. There is the second ambush, by the way, so that's coming.
You were saying that RDU's hand is very low value. I don't really think he needs that much value to win this kind of game. I'm still heavily favoring RDU's position, and that's not even seeing that his deck is chock full of value generating cards in the future.
Yeah, it's really exposing, which we already knew, how grim the Shaman deck is. It's got a job, and you've got to bring it, so you might as well make it do a job, and it's done its job. But again, like I said, after game number 2, the problem is you're still stuck with Shaman after you get your 1 win with it.
Right. Shaman is not a fan of overtime pay at all. It is clocked in the 30 minutes of work it needed for this series, and it checked out afterwards once it saw that it was facing against a rogue.
Yeah. And I mean, yeah, the rogue's not really done anything, and it's clearly miles in front. Are you surprised? I asked Gia this as well. Are you surprised how few 3-2s we've had so far? I cursed that series, so I might as well curse this one because that was a 3-2 straight after I asked.
I believe that every match I've casted so far has been a 3-2.
Oh, okay.
So
awesome.
From your perspective, maybe. And I mean, okay, going back to my point, the Shadow Step with the Flick is just gonna run this over, right?
Yeah. And Zerlang knows it. You see him shake his head there the second that the Flick goes face. He knows exactly what that means.
And that is a dead Shaman. Yeah, that's game over. The world where Shaman wins this would have to be Sludge Slurper into Ethereal Lackey into... I'm not coming up with anything, Lorinda.
Sorry, I'm leaving that to you. You expect me to come up with ideas?
The odds of Zolong winning this game are probably around 1 in a million, maybe 1 in a billion. I'm not sure. Well, there's the Sludge Slurper.
Yeah, we haven't even got the old
1 in 7 for an Ethereal Lackey. The Ethereal Lackey needs to be Plague of Murlocs. And then with 7 minions in play, the Plague of Murlocs turns the entire board into Murloc War Leaders and Blueveil Warriors and just OTKs RDU.
So what's the chance of him playing 2 lackeys and they're both the same?
That's not good enough.
Zerlang, why would you shake your head there? I understand you shaking your head a couple of turns ago because you got absolutely destroyed. But when you don't get the lackey you're looking for, when you're facing down a million attack, I don't think you care anymore. You know you've lost that game. Quite amusing to me. And it's 2-1 to G2.
Yeah, I mean, after a certain point, I think RDU had locked up that game. You kind of see where Totem Shaman struggles a lot. They're a very glass cannon type of deck. There are certain cards that will just by themselves win you the game against Totem Shaman. Against me, I had a match during the week of the 10 deck format during Grandmasters. I was playing someone and I played a Totem and they went Hench Clan Hogsteed. And I pretty much conceded on the spot. So it just single cards will ruin that deck's game plan. So like you were saying, it did its job in the slow matchup, but it really is going to struggle when it gets checked by those kinds of cards in Rogue, or if you saw it in something like another Galakron Shaman, etc. But I mean, we still have some games to play. It's only 1-2 for Lucky Future, and they still have the choice of what their final deck will be. They have access to Mage, they use Priest. So they have access to Mage, Paladin, Demon Hunter, and Druid, I believe. So out of those two, they need to beat G2's Rogue, and then they need to beat whatever G2Q's afterwards. So if you had to choose what your final deck is going to be for this kind of match, it's your decider match. You're going to get eliminated if you lose either one of these 2 games. Is there any choice besides Demon Hunter that makes sense, Lorinda?
I was just going to say there's no choice apart from Demon Hunter that makes sense. Yeah, you've got the match against Rogue, which is probably not favoured anymore, which is scary. But you've still got Demon Hunter if you get it done, and you're probably favoured against all the janky decks that your opponents have been forced to bring to the tournament at that point.
A couple things
so with that in
remember.
Mind, I think
a couple things to remember is that Lucky Future's Demon Hunter, like we were saying earlier, I believe, yeah, it is the control Demon Hunter. So that matchup is like a lot wackier than before. And actually, I had a very helpful friend of mine, if you don't mind me muting my mic 1 second, Noblord actually messaged me stats for this, for Control Demon Hunter's matchup. So I will spend 10 seconds finding them real quick.
I mean, this is the world where I'm supposed to be the stats guy, and my casting partner, who can probably still hear me, just goes and stats me up, just taking away every semblance of ability I have. But he can't find them because he's not organised. Just commentating on Gallon right now. He's laughing. We got it. We win. So the Demon Hunter is indeed the Eddie build, the control build, if they pick that, which makes it possibly less likely to be chosen.
I just tuned back in. I found the stats that Albert gave me, and while I mentioned Rogue, I think this is a good time to mention what his opinions are on the other matchups that could be seen right now. Control DH, he says, is slightly good versus Rogue, so that is a decent cue. He also says that it's very good versus other Demon Hunters, Warlocks, Mages, and Shamans. And then he says that it is favored versus Priests, like we were saying earlier, but it's a very hard matchup to play. That being said, he believes that the Highlander Hunter Druid matchups are slightly unfavored, and that it is very bad versus Warrior, and surprisingly, Libram Pure Paladin. So those are Control Demon Hunter's two worst matchups, Paladin and Warrior.
So we might end up seeing a Paladin versus Demon Hunter final game, depending on what's been picked here. Yu Ying, absolutely favoured by the Chinese casters. Look at that massive hexagon of yellow there.
And I don't disagree with that. Whenever I got a chance to see Yu Ying play, I've come away really impressed. We haven't seen much of him. I believe that he was in the 2018 and 2019 Winter Championships. That's the tournament where he qualified to the World Championships, where he finished 8th place, very respectable. But that was a very weird tournament because Yu Ying finished in the top 8 and not top 4. And to qualify for Worlds, you had to be top 4. So there was a very interesting tiebreaker tussle that happened where not one player was already qualified in the championship. So that means that the 5th place would move on to the World Championships. But 3 players in the Winter Championship were qualified. So 3 out of the 4 top 8 members that were not in the top 4, so 5, 6, and 7, also all qualified for Worlds. So it was just a very interesting tournament to be part of. I'm almost like really lucky to be part of. In some respects, just having, almost double the chance to make Worlds from a single championship. But Yu Ying qualified through that tiebreaker tussle to finish 8th at Worlds.
Yeah, and apparently it's known, and I don't know if this is still true, this is going back to that Worlds, that Yu Ying is quite tilty and he actually just sings when he needs to calm down after losing at Hearthstone. Like, just... There's different ways of dealing with tilt, and Yu Ying's is to sing. He's also a pretty big streamer, I believe.
This actually reminds me of something that I totally forgot about. Wasn't Yu Ying's interview for the Winter Championship, didn't they have a segment where he was singing and he said, "Don't look at me through the camera, I have to be behind like a partitioned door"?
Yep, that's the one. He likes when he's standing
That was
in the corner,
really funny. That was really funny.
really quietly and really quite well as well, I seem to remember. Yeah. But they have queued up the Mage. Mage seems to be a deck that all of us are underrating as casters. We tend to not look at it. Maybe we just don't want to look at it because it's Mage, but most of us haven't been picking that as a counter to anything for most of these matches.
Well, a thing about Mage that is true for Rogue, and in some respects is Priest, is that the games generally go long. The cards are generally cheap, which means that you play a lot of cards in a long game, which means that there's lots of decisions to be made. So in those kinds of games, smart players feel like they have a big advantage over their opponent because they just get to make more choices than the other player. A lot of those choices end up not mattering in a single series, but sometimes they do, and if you're making 100 choices and each time, they matter 1% of the time, you have a really high shot of winning just based off your decisions alone.
Yeah, I mean, we see best of 5. The top players get consistently 70% win rates over the other top players. So yeah, making decisions is making a difference somewhere in those lines. You might not see them glaringly obviously hit you in the face. That's why not everybody gets to be a top player, strangely enough, but they do matter. They add up really, really quickly. It's why you should analyze your play not just with, oh yeah, I'd have done all of that but that one play. You should really analyze that one play and find out why you were not. It's really important.
I could talk about that for ages, about like win rate and what it means for top players. I guess like this is a good time to talk about it, which is that in a lot of Hearthstone tournaments, it's not necessarily that winning is super hard. It's just that losing is very easy. You have to win 7 or 8 games to advance to the top 8, but you can only lose 1 or 2. And, any individual match of Hearthstone might not be that complicated to win. But when you have 7 matches in a day and you have to win all 7 of them to advance, like suddenly you really need to nail every single interaction that happens. So that's like kind of the difference between a great player and the best player is, maybe one match they mess up, or even one game they mess up, and that's what costs them the match. And, a single game means your entire tournament run in a lot of these large open style Masters tournaments.
Yeah, and sometimes you flew in the night before and it's round 5 and you've been playing for 14 hours counting check-in. And you're not allowed to
Do you
lose
think
that
there's a
game.
home advantage to open tournaments?
Yeah, for sure. For absolute sure.
That's
I
surprising.
think playing in your own time zone is very relevant. I think I've cast in all 3 time zones recently. As Yuyin goes with a pink face, we need to talk about this immediately. I don't like it. I never have.
I think this is really funny. You know, I was the one that started this entire argument on Twitter, by the way.
Yeah, I remember. I do remember.
I got
Were
1,000
you being
votes.
facetious, or did you
worded
mean it though?
Specifically so that people would answer yes. They pinged their own face.
Mm-hmm. That sounds like a gallant thing to do. I don't like it. It just makes
What I wanted
very
to
little
happen
sense to me.
was I was playing Rogue at that time, and I just wanted 1 free damage versus all the mages that I was seeing. There was a ton of mages on ladder, and I was like, you know, this is a really good way to get 1 free damage every single game. And it worked out like pretty well. For the next like week and a half, every single mage just pinged their own face against me. I was like, yes, 3% of the way there.
Well, pinging his own face here, but also in a very tight spot indeed. We'll have the option to get out of it next turn with Doomsayer shenanigans, but even that might not work. But for the time being, Yu Ying has nothing
As RDU
going
says
on.
an answer for a Frost Nova Doomsayer, I think he will be fine. Problem is, what would that look like? Because he needs to activate this Evil Miscreant as well. And he might even be interested in just playing the Kobold Lackey to get that 1 extra buff on his questing adventure. It's hard to say.
Yeah, maybe he will. It's just tempting, isn't it? But if he does identify, it's the only way he loses the game. And that's slightly exaggerated because we can see the rolling fireball as well. He may just go for it.
So now RDU has an option here. What's really interesting about this is that Yu Ying has RDU checked multiple ways right now, and RDU does not know that. RDU is definitely thinking right now, and he's calculating what will happen against a rolling fireball. If he goes Kobold Lackey plus Evil Miscreant, he will get the questing adventure out of range. He'll get another Lackey. It will be a 9 health minion. However, what RDU does not know is that Yu Ying has this Frost Nova Doomsayer in hand as well. So I think that no matter really what RDU does here, he's kind of lost, at least in the mid game. You know, this game is going to go for a lot longer. It's not going to be as clean as just a small or as just a questing adventure is going to get there, if that makes sense.
But does sensibly play around the 1 card combo, not the 2 card combo? It's just...
in some ways, because the rolling fireball still does clear the questing adventure.
Mm-hmm. But you have, you know, your opponent uses their whole turn at doing that, and then you get back to work and have more things going on yourself. So
I do not
get rid of your big threat. You keep hitting.
I don't like what RDU did at the very end here. I think the Lackey probably should have gone on the far right instead of the far left. I don't really see a reason to give the rolling fireball this good of an opportunity.
Sure. Yeah.
You know, you're just losing 1 damage the next turn.
Yeah, that's definitely incorrect. Absolutely.
Yeah, and you know, 1 damage. Okay, so I know this is going to sound kind of crazy, but 1 damage now matters way more than 1 damage earlier. You know, when your opponent's at 16, they're pretty much at half their life total. So, you know, 1 damage against 16 life is twice as much as 1 damage against 30 life.
No, it's correct, because early on you didn't know that 1 damage was going to be that important, but now you can see that you've done a lot of early damage. The 1 damage is crucial, and you've got to be very, very careful about it.
For sure. RDU is going in, and I don't think it's really going to pay off right now.
Don't. I guess
Yu Ying's hand has been sick versus what RDU's game plan is.
Mm-hmm.
That's just
There's no way he
painful.
can get this done. So, Galakond Shadowstep Kronks is a thing that can happen here.
Yep.
So we might see him do absolutely nothing on this turn apart from Dagger Face.
Dagger Face does make some sense. Developing the 6/6 isn't that bad either, but yeah, I think the damage from the Kronks is going to be really important to win this game. Yu Yang has the option to go Dragon Caster plus the Deep Freeze, but RDU actually can refresh his hero power, so you can get that 1 extra damage in. If he plays his Galakron, it's going to remove the freeze because you're switching heroes, which means that RDU can actually attack with the stagger. But Lorinda, I mean, RDU did miss 1 damage so far this game.
Yeah.
If he gets a Kobold Lackey off of this Seal Fate, right, that's going to be 2 damage plus the 5 from the Kronk's Dragon Hoof. 1 in 7 times, I believe that RDU actually threw this game.
And it wasn't like, again, it wasn't a complicated thing that you're going to turn 5 against Mage, and he was obviously playing around the rolling fireball to some degree just to try and get an extra board up.
Mm-hmm.
It's not like an obscure thing he would have missed. It's a very straightforward thing.
If this is a Kobold Lackey, RDU literally just misses some percentage to win. Doesn't find it, so he didn't immediately throw the game, but it's still, that's a big one. Having 11% to win, or not even 11%, excuse me, it's 1 in 7. It's way higher than 11.
But that's the difference between playing Constructed every day and being in a fairly good tournament shape. That's just a little bit of, let's say, rust, because RDU plays a lot of Battlegrounds now. And you do miss little things when you're not playing quite as often. To never miss those points of damage, you have to be playing a lot of Hearthstone, even though it seems straightforward.
For sure. I think Rolling Fireball is the one where it's one of the cards that players play around the least. I've seen it in tons of Grandmasters games where people don't position for Rolling Fireball. I've seen it in the top 8s of Masters Tour. And the players I'm talking about are not just random nobodies. They're players like Felkane, they're players like Deaddraw, they're players like me not playing around Rolling Fireball. So I imagine it's a mistake that you make once and never make again, but maybe RDU hasn't had the chance to make that mistake yet.
Yeah, that's a good way of putting it. That's what I was trying to say about the not playing a million times like he used to, is hasn't had a chance to make that mistake once. Whereas somebody like me, strangely enough, they're the sort of mistakes I make many, many, many mistakes, especially with Rogue, but not walking into a rolling fireball on turn 5 isn't one of them. It's kind of the first thing I'm looking at. Looks like it's going to be 2 apiece. We're not quite there yet, I guess.
Frost Nova is probably going to come down as well. Yu Ying is just playing for tempo. I really like that strategy. I don't think there's a reason to give RDU any room to maneuver in this matchup. Limiting the amount of turns that are going to happen, I think, benefits Yu Ying in the long run.
Togwaggle.
Togwaggle is a huge pickup. That could find something that wins. It's really unlikely. It's incredibly unlikely to find something that wins. But, you could either go for massive taunts. You could wand into a... Now, wanding into something I think is way less likely to win. I'm not sure exactly what would wand.
So you're not going to get any benefits from lackeys, from redraws, etc. here?
I think it may have been Zerog's Crown to win. Off the top of my head, I'm trying to think of large taunts. The biggest that I can come up with is Hogger right now, but that's definitely not the largest taunt available in the pool. However, I don't think that Wondrous Wand really got there. But yeah, we didn't see it happen, but Lorinda, I do think that RDU threw about 14 to 15% in that series by not positioning around Rolling Fireball.
What can you say? He has had a long day as well. He was playing the Battlegrounds earlier, so weirdly early.
He performed really well in Battlegrounds today too. I believe he got a first place finish in one of the matches. Correct me if I'm wrong on that, but RDU. So just because we are criticizing what's happening in this game does not mean that RDU is anything less than a very smart person. He's been committing his time a lot to Battlegrounds. He's been spending a lot of time on it, and it is paying off. He is a genius when it comes to Battlegrounds. And if he was spending that time on Constructed, I'm sure he wouldn't make this kind of mistake. It just so happens that he has very active stream. People like watching Battlegrounds, so that's kind of what he devotes most of his time to. So
yeah, he's the best player at their peak who never got to World Championships.
Right.
Like
I
he missed out a couple of times. He had a Soulfire straight up 50-50. Everyone said he played it incorrectly. He didn't when it was matched out. He played it correctly. It went against him, so everyone decided to hindsight it. That could have got him an extra round towards that World Championships. He came top 8 when he needed a top 4. He came close again the next time. This is a guy who basically played the World Championships, except he wasn't there. That's how good he was at his peak.
RDU is one of the people that has been around longest in the scene, so him taking a short break from Constructed to focus on a new game mode of Hearthstone is, it's totally reasonable and makes a lot of sense, honestly. You don't have 45 hours in a day to play every single game mode. So if he wants to focus on being the best Battlegrounds player, I think that's actually paying off. But that being said, Yu Ying also played the series pretty well. I don't think he had a ton of crazy decisions that had to be made. I think that everything was fairly mapped out after the initial couple turns when he managed to rolling Fireball the Questing Adventurer. But, his game plan, he did have RDU checked in like 5 different ways in the early game. And I think that he really capitalized it on the mid game. So, not a super difficult game from Yu Ying's perspective, but I think he nailed every single decision.
It will be interesting to see as time goes by if some of the organizations actually end up with more players. If Battlegrounds events become more and more common, whether like G2 here have RDU doubling up basically, whether you start getting specialized players like they already have in China, where you have, okay, Nightwalk is not going to play Constructor, we're not letting him anywhere near it, but he can play Battlegrounds with his 14,600 Chinese MMR, and go for it.
Yeah, and then for Battlegrounds, you need to have at least 2 people, it seems like. Every single Battlegrounds tournament so far, the invitationals that have been happening for just the Hearthstone invitationals, excuse me, those were teams of 2, at least in the 8-man or 8-person groups. For this one, there's still teams of 2, and it's like maybe there's going to be, a team that picks up 2 players, and in the off season they just practice with each other and like figure out like exactly how to manipulate that 2-person squad to get the best benefit. Maybe there's
some shockers in that in this tournament in particular, but people need to work that out.
If I press Panda, Sad Cow plus Waving Murloc, that means one specific strategy, but it's pretty funny to me. So
yeah, it could be like bridge, and it wouldn't take long. Like if you identify the things you've actually got control over in Battlegrounds, it wouldn't take long to develop that weird secret language. That'd be really good fun to watch.
Yeah, I think that is, if Battlegrounds continues and grows as its own competitive system, I actually imagine that's like there's a lot of money on the table in terms of that. I think that is a great strategy that is being very underutilized, just because there hasn't really been enough time to utilize it as efficiently as possible. But, we are going into the final game of this series. We're playing Constructed and not Battlegrounds, so enough of that nonsense. We have Yu Ying is going to be playing Mage for Lucky Future, and they are going to be up against one of G2's decks, that being Shaman, their own Mage, their own Priest, and their own Paladin. So, of these 4 choices, we've seen people queuing Shaman into Mage recently with Galakrond Shaman. However, I'm not a huge fan of that. I think if I was G2 in this spot, I'd be looking at queuing their own Highlander Mage or their own Priest, excuse me.
Thank you. Somebody finally wants to put Priests into Mage, because that's what I want to do every time that I see a Mage, but the players so far have just not been doing it. Maybe there's something about that matchup I'm not understanding, or maybe I'm better than all the players on display and I should be out there playing.
Personally, of the 3, I think Priest would be my second choice to queue into Mage. I think the Mage Mirror is probably the best one for G2 at this point. I think that of the players remaining, G2 probably has the highest odds of winning with Highlander Mage. So Priest does still have some merit. It seems a little bit less consistent and just a little bit less fun to play into a Highlander Mage compared to the Mirror.
I mean, I don't want to watch Priest versus Mage because it's the most soul-destroying matchup to watch. It's worse than Priest versus Priest because nothing happens and Mage runs out of cards, and then the Priest goes, yes, I won, and 2 hours have gone by and nothing has occurred apart from maybe a box. And whereas Mage versus Mage is a lot more fun. But realistically, I think the Priest has just got the best odds. I really do.
Sure. I mean, that just comes down to personal preference then. I really wouldn't be surprised to see any of the decks being queued. Obviously, it's going to be Casey playing for G2 right now. He's not technically on G2. He's still playing for Complexity, but they brought him on for this tournament because of his amazing plays. I was going to say lightning fast, but I think that's a little bit too on the nose.
I think he plays it really quickly, and I think we should talk about it a lot.
Okay, so for Casey, I did talk about this with Casey beforehand. He does not like people saying that he talks too fast, or he plays too fast, and he might get a little bit angry at me over this. My hot take is that I agree that Casey does not play too fast. I think that Casey has an innate knack for Hearthstone. He has a lot of talent for this game, along with tons of preparation. I don't want to discredit Casey at all, but if you were going to sit down, 100 Hearthstone players in a room, and you gave him 5 seconds to look at a board state and say, what's the best play here? Casey's going to get it right 95% of the time.
Mm-hmm.
And it's going to be one of the highest, if not the highest, odds of just figuring it out almost immediately. But for Casey, what I think he doesn't do is once he finds that good play on the decision tree, he doesn't look further into the decision tree.
Mm-hmm.
And, a lot of times he does rope out in Hearthstone. When it's a very hard turn, Casey, and he doesn't immediately spot it, he's going to spend his time thinking about what a good decision is. I don't think that his plays are because he plays too fast. I think it's because he finds a good play and then says, this is good enough, instead of spending that next 60 seconds to figure it out. And that might translate to looking like he plays too fast, but I don't really think that's what's happening here. And that being said, when he gets it right 95% of the time, that's a really high number. Like 95% of the time, that 5-second play is the right one. And, in some respects, I think that it benefits Casey more than it detracts from him. When you play at that speed, or at that seemingly very fast speed, your opponent can often get baited into playing in styles that they would normally not play in. They might feel a little bit too rushed, for example.
Very much so, and I agree with all of that. I absolutely agree with everything you said. I just saw Casey's salty tweet saying we talked about him playing too fast too much, so figured we should have a 10-minute rant about it, to be honest. Because Casey is a lovely person and an incredibly good Hearthstone player. The year we talked about earlier, 2018, he was the player with the most top 16 finishes. Now you might think, well, why didn't he have the most wins then? Well, top 16 finishes are kind of the measure, unless you're Hunter Ace. Top 16 finishes are kind of the measure of how good you are. Hunter Ace was really the only player who could regularly turn those into more than just, top 16 players smashing it out against each other, seeing who wins.
I think that the most upsetting thing about finishing top 16 is that a lot of times it rewarded points, but you never really got in the money. Casey had a bunch of top 16s, but top 8 was really the marker where you actually had a profitable event or broke even on flights and stuff with a top 8. So, a lot. I think most of the time it came down to pretty poor luck, honestly. Like a lot of times when you see Casey's games in the top 16, they were just non-games, which is pretty unfortunate.
It was an 8 or 9 match sample size, right? And I think the first 4 he just didn't have a chance to play Hearthstone.
Yeah.
I don't think he particularly enjoys pressure. If I did want to pick an actual negative about Casey's play, which I don't, because I really like watching Casey play, but it's kind of my job too. So I don't think he enjoys the pressure of some situations. But I think he now has enough experience and has done it enough times that I don't think that really affects him anymore.
For sure. Yeah, I mean, the only time, when I think of the errors that Casey's made throughout his career, there's very few. There's a lot of really great plays, and the errors that I can think of, they're never ones of he doesn't know what's going on. Casey's mind for Hearthstone is really smart, and every single time, a misplay happened, it's like a really dumb one. You know what I mean?
Yeah, it's sort of things
he'll come
that
up
I
to you
could
after
get
a match.
right. Yeah.
The one that I can remember the most, and this is the only example I'm going to give because I do not want to harp on Casey too much. Just listing errors that he's made, that seems really stupid. But the one that I can remember is at the the Global Finals last year that I was casting with Hunter Ace. We were watching a game of Casey versus Surrender, and long story short, Casey filled up his board against a deck that had Leroy Jenkins and Shadow Step in it. And because Casey filled up his board, Surrender decided to say, you know what? I'm not going to even worry about this. You have 7 minutes in play. You can't play anything else. You can't play a taunt. I'm going to equip a Waggle Pick, hit you in the face. The next turn, I'm going to play a Leroy Jenkins, hit you with a Waggle Pick, bounce Leroy Jenkins back to my hand, hit you again. It's going to kill you for exactly equal. And Casey had no answer to that because he filled up his board. And after the game, he was like, dude, that was you know that I know how to do all of this stuff. And I was like, yes, Casey, I do know that you know how to do all this stuff, but it still happened. You know what I mean?
Now, as it happens, all the stuff we've been talking about that was, partially the thing that he hates, and we're not going to do it again anymore in this tournament, is actually relevant here, because fast players in general are going to hate the situation where there's this disconnect. They want to get on with it. That's why they're fast players.
I would say that slow players also hate. I think generally people don't like when the game disconnects.
Sure, I mean, you never like it, but it definitely affects the quicker players more. That being said, more to the point, we didn't really get to talk about it because we were having a bit of a waffle, is Casey picked the priest. And that surprised me for two reasons. One, because nobody has picked the priest. But also, two, nothing to do with the style conversation we just had, but I don't really think of Casey as a player who plays much priest.
Yeah, I kind of agree with that. Casey, to me, he's not really a priest player. For the first couple years of Hearthstone, he was probably the best rogue player in the world, at least in Miracle Rogue. That game plan, really benefited Casey's playstyle, where his instinctual ability to figure out the best play, combined with the fact that you have to do 45 things in a Miracle Rogue turn, and you don't get to see what your options are until you do the first. You don't get to map it all out. You have to do it one after the other. It's kind of it's not Blitz chess, it's Blitz Hearthstone. And Casey was insane at that. But I still kind of view Casey as a rogue player, even though Galakrond Rogue is much different, I would say, than old Miracle Rogue. But yeah, priest is not really what I associate Casey with.
That being said, we are used to seeing Casey not so much in invitationals as some of these players, but more in big tournaments. And playing priest in big tournaments is the reserve of a very few people, the likes of Yala, who are willing to sit there and be last to finish every single, not even a speed discussion, really. You've just got to be willing to know that even if you play reasonably fast, you're going to be last every single round and get no break, no time to have something to eat, no refreshments, because the tournament organizer is sort of holding you by the neck and telling you to sit back down and play your next round.
It might have been DreamHack Montreal where we were at, where Yarla held up the bracket by about an hour and a half. And we were just sitting there, and every single round had finished, and it was Yarla versus another person, 1-0. And it's Yarla, so stop roping. Play your cards.
That event was an event where we were taking people from the floor if the round was still going and putting them on camera. Rather than, if the backup game had finished, the main game had finished, and Yarla's still playing on table 37 somewhere in the middle of the arena, we'd get them and put them on stage. And I think we cast Yarla every single round, even though we didn't schedule him once, just because he was still out in the arena with 2 more games to go.
Yeah, and I actually believe he finished top 8 at that event, which is a very impressive performance. I might be wrong. It might have been...
No, he did.
I think it was Montreal where Yarla finished top 8. That was a pretty long time ago. But
that tournament was nutty. That's the one where the final was one of... I think it was the second best Hearthstone match ever played, behind the Viper Huntrace match, which was Saiyan versus Fino.
Yeah, and I believe you're referring to the Death Rattle Hunter versus Questro game.
Yeah, I mean, just that whole final. It wasn't necessarily the whole coming together of Saiyan, the 2 players who hadn't won one, trying to catch Huntrace and sort of make their names, because Huntrace was just the only person we talked about. Still is. And it came together in that massive final, Saiyan versus Fino. And it was just... not just some good games, but there was drama, it was close, there was some top decks, it was everything you ever wanted from a final.
There was a lot of really interesting matches from 2018 if you're interested in old Hearthstone tournaments. But getting back into this game, because this is the tournament happening right now instead of 2.5, 3 years ago, Casey is in a pretty decent spot, I would say. He has Galakrond online at a very healthy life total, Murazan in hand. And that Fate Weaver is going to reduce the cost of everything by 1. And when you're hitting a 9-card hand with Fate Weaver, you're probably in a decent spot to win.
Yeah, and it's in this matchup, I believe personally anyway, that it's on the onus of the Mage to do something, and the Priest has all the answers here. The Priest can get the board. That's just an added extra. You don't need to. You just sit back and do nothing. And Casey is going to be able to just populate the board very rapidly. This makes some difference.
Yep. I imagine Yu Ying has not seen Power of Creation either, and either of those options were just very powerful. There's a pretty cheeky thing that Casey has access to right now, which is Lazul Scheme plus Shadow Madness.
Yep, that's pretty cheeky indeed.
He still has a Shadow Madness in hand, so... I guess my question for this play is... I'm not entirely sure about that. Casey probably has had this worked out for quite a while, and since we're just tuning back into the game, I don't have great insight into that. It seems like Breath of the Infinite does a really good job of clearing off these 3-1s, but they do kind of check the 3-6 on Yu Ying's turn.
Yeah, do you mind too much? I mean, obviously you mind. You don't want to lose a 3-6 to 3-1s, but I'm not sure it's the worst thing that ever happened.
Sure. You don't mind too much, but added pressure is always good in this kind of matchup. So Yu Ying definitely is looking to protect them. I think that makes a lot of sense. No reason not to, right?
Yep. Well, Casey can clear this up any way he wants to now. And should be able to get on board nicely. Now things become very difficult for the Mage, although Yu Ying has got access to pretty good cards for a few turns to come yet.
This was a really good Murazan. My mind blanked on the fact that that was a Malygos's Tome. I didn't even realize at the time, so that extra 3 Mage spells is really going to help Casey. He gets a Mirror Entity, which I think is going to be pretty critical against these large minions. Learn Draconic, obviously, is just a 1-mana 6/6, which is crazy powerful. And another play that we failed to mention is the fact that Casey just Lazul schemed for tempo. I think that makes a lot of sense if you're going for Murazan, right?
Yeah, it looks absolutely fine to me. The Apotheosis in hand's a big deal because now this Alexstrasza is just wasted if it gets used.
I don't even think Yu Ying has the time to play Alexstrasza.
I mean, we can see he definitely doesn't, but... So, I mean, like original Alexstrasza, not Dragon Queen.
I was agreeing with you. The original Alexstrasza, I don't think he has time for it. There's an 8/8 and 6/6 on Casey's side. This might have to be something like Polymorph and Fireball.
Yeah, that's the play that actually keeps the game rolling nicely.
It keeps Yu Ying ahead on board, which I think is better than falling behind. Oh, he even saves the Fireball, uses the Doomsayer. This is actually really genius by Yu Ying, because he still manages to have tempo, but he saves the more important removal spell in Fireball. I really like this play from Yu Ying. This is really smart. I don't think I would have spotted
the Fireball. He needs this Fireball to go face eventually, most likely, right? So saving that's a big deal.
Potentially. It might be also that Fireball is just a better removal spell than Doomsayer is, and like he found a turn where Doomsayer and Fireball did kind of the same thing. It's hard to say without knowing exactly what they're thinking, but I imagine it's just that he wants to say Fireball as removal, if possible.
But you do get into this game of chicken now as to what to do with the Doomsayer. In case he can deal with everything here, with the Time Writ and the Apotheosis, if he wishes. And now,
this does make a lot of sense.
This is the downside of the play Yu Ying made. This was not an unlikely outcome.
Sure. However, Yu Ying did manage to bait out an Apotheosis, and he has now has an answer with the Arcane Breath, so the Alexstrasza does pretty meaningful damage at this point, whereas before it was getting checked by that Apotheosis. Just something to think about.
Yeah, it's a constant chain working backwards, right? He knew he couldn't play Alexstrasza until the Apotheosis was gone. I say I mean there are 2 of them, but you think in ones at this point and just hope that they didn't draw both.
Unfortunately, he still can't really develop this Dragon Queen Alexstrasza, right? I mean, I guess you can. You can play the Dragon Queen Alexstrasza, play one of the dragons, and still draw for next turn. There's only 9 cards in hand, so that still might be the play over something like Arcane Breath Fireball. Arcane Breath Fireball plus ping just gives it way too much tempo to Casey. You still need to fight for board, and this is probably the best way of doing that. Ugh.
I love these games where both players kind of ignore each other to a lot more degree than you'd expect. And yeah, ugh, indeed.
Those are awful. That one is not awful. That one's great.
Oh my. Box turns. I was watching Huntrace play a game yesterday, talking about Alexstrasza's, and he needed to make space in his hand, so he played Dragon Queen Alexstrasza and needed to dump one of the dragons. And he got Kobold, Scalebane, and Deathwing and had 1 mana left. Literally had to burn a card.
Oh. Well, those are great dragons. They kill the 8/8. Casey's like way back in this. That's a pretty commanding board state now. Amazing Reno is... Did he get the info that Amazing Reno is not in hand based on the fact that he saw it off of an Envoy of Lazul? I might be wrong about that.
I'm not sure. He saw... Box was one of the options. Intellect. I'm not sure what the third was.
I'm probably wrong then.
Here comes Box.
Not a bad start. Humility on the 8/9, hopefully. Yep. Oh, that is not humility. Excuse me. I
like
cannot speak or read
Battlegrounds
Chinese. I'm sorry that... Yeah, I apologize. I had 7 days to prepare for this. That did not include learning fluent Mandarin.
So the Box has worked out okay.
Yep.
It's not special.
That was great.
Do.
There was 2 5/3s, an 8/9, and a 6/6, and the box cleared the board and gave Yu Ying tempo. That's more than good enough.
It's interesting now because Casey, because of Alexstrasza on the other side of the board, really can't afford to have a bad turn at any point. At least until he gets that other apotheosis.
It's a decent 5/6. I imagine Casey just wants to keep playing his biggest minion every single turn. I think from Casey's perspective, the game plan is simplified a lot, and that's not a good thing. I think he is now kind of on the back foot in a lot of regards, and he has to hope that playing his biggest minion just works every single turn, and that is very unlikely against Mage, especially when they still have a bunch of cards in hand. They haven't played their Zephyrus, they haven't played their Amazing Reno, they have tons of answers remaining in deck, and they're at 27 life.
Still, it's Yu Ying that's got to kill Casey, though. Otherwise, Casey will win, and he does have Shadow Word Death available to him. There's a bit of card draw, strong hero power. But looking at this board, he's going to have a couple of these boards to fend off as well. So I don't think it's over yet.
I just want to point out that the further this game progresses, it does seem like you were right about Yu Ying's saving of the Fireball. I was expecting him to be using it as removal. Maybe there hasn't really been a great Fireball removal turn so far, but there was a 5/6 last turn that he had 4 mana to kill with. And, you know, Alexstrasza face, a bunch of minions plus a Fireball really does get the job done. You've been saying this for quite a while now, that is Yu Ying's win condition in this matchup. And the more we see this game progress, the more you're looking right, Lorinda.
Yeah, I'm sorry about that. It had to happen one day. But yeah, I've actually seen this matchup more than I should have, and I don't know why, because it's not in the Gold Team Championship that I saw it. So I'm not quite sure where I did see this matchup a lot, but...
All right. I believe
the Mage
Yu Ying
doesn't
has
usually
one play
get
here.
there.
And we just mentioned it. This seems like the turn where you just Alexstrasza the Priest in the face. You deal 10. It sets up for lethal pretty easily. If they have like a penance or something, you go Blizzard Ping. Excuse me for interrupting you, by the way. I just wanted to point this out, that your game plan is coming together on this turn.
Yeah, and I think the hard thing is for Yu Ying to be sure. Like, we can see there's no apotheosis, but does he think he can win it anyway? That's the question he's asking himself now. Because I would have, obviously with the benefit of being able to see both hands, But I did feel that like, Casey hasn't got one. Just go Alex Straza face and all the things you just said, and then hope it's not there. But if Yu Ying thinks he's going to win it anyway, then that's a needless risk. You don't need to risk the top deck necessarily if you think you're just going to get it done with the cards in hand.
That's definitely fair. I mean, Casey is running out of cards, and you can make the argument that taking it slow is still just the optimal play, just based off the fact that, you know, maybe there is a risk associated with giving your opponent so many minions. Kronks comes to mind. Kronks would be able to buff everything back up and then get value trades, and you'd be in a little bit of trouble if you didn't find the Amazing Reno pretty soon.
Yeah, I mean, the way he lost the game from where he was there was Alex go everything face, and Casey has the apotheosis, clears up some things, and just starts attacking you like crazy. And Yu Ying seems to think that he knows that the Alex play is a good play, but he seems to think that possibly why even bother with that risk at all?
Interesting that he decides to kill that 4/4 and not the one that is just a regular 4/4. That just seems like a little bit sloppy to me. Killing the dragon just makes more sense.
Yep.
Don't think it's going to matter too much, but you know, now he has a 4/2 instead of a 2/2 from Casey's perspective. Just a small thing.
I assume that he won't play Solarian until he can kill it himself, which might not actually be a thing that can happen.
Casey has played both Shadow Madnesses so far, so for the Astromancer Solarian to be checked by a Shadow Madness, which is normally what you want to play around in this matchup. If your Astromancer Solarian gets Shadow Madness, suddenly the Priest has access to Solarian Prime, and Solarian Prime is an insane card. That being said, in this specific game, you know, the Shadow Madness has been played.
But there is a Soul Mirror.
There is a Soul Mirror, but I mean, you bring up that's a pretty valid argument. Soul Mirror does check this board pretty well. Maybe Yu Ying thinks that Soul Mirror here is a net positive for him because it's just Casey playing for another pretty weak non-tempo based turn.
Yeah, although it gives Casey the 3/5/4/4 actual access to them now. Like he actually has I'm going to call it a sticky board. I'm aware that's a little bit hyperbole, but he actually has something going on for the first time that Yu Ying has to react to, and then Casey, in theory, has a hero power and a couple of big minions to play, although in practice he actually has a bunch of garbage.
Right. I mean, it's just like both players value this board differently. Casey doesn't really care if this board is killed, but Yu Ying really cares if it isn't killed, if that makes sense. You know, these could be any type of minions. They could be a 4/4 and a 3/2. It could be a 7/7 and a 1/1. It doesn't really matter. What matters is that Yu Ying still has to respond to them at some point, or he's going to get run over. On Casey's perspective, though, if they do get killed, Casey can just reload, and he can keep doing that for a pretty long time.
Yeah, we're starting to reach that tipping point now where the Priest does get enough going on that he can just kill everything. Not quite there yet, because this Alex Straza, the Fireball, Zephyrus, Reno are all powerful cards, and Yu Ying hasn't even given up fighting for the board yet.
Could we make an argument then that the Alex Straza play may have been the line to like lock this game up? I know that's like way too early. To tell.
Going back, the only reason I defended the play was that I think he thought he was okay, but we're starting to see now that maybe he wasn't okay, and if he got that wrong, he definitely should have just taken the insta-win.
Yeah, and that being said, there's still a lot of turns to play out. This matchup could easily reach fatigue. Casey does have a lot of threat in play right now, but Yu Ying always has the answer with the Amazing Reno to clear up a large board state. Both players have a Solarian Prime in their deck, which could do any number of different things, and Casey is definitely running out of stuff to be doing for the next couple turns. He really has to rely on the Galakrond hero power to give him good minions.
Yeah, and it's not been behaving itself, to be fair.
If Yu Ying wants to take this as slow as possible with just an Amazing Reno, he is very much afforded the opportunity to do so. Even now, I think he's going for the slower game plan of, oh, correct me, I am wrong about this.
I don't think he can be too slow. He loses on fatigue. Like, he's got the better cards, he's got the better card quality.
Is he going for Shadow Menace here? At least it seems like, okay, so this is just the max tempo game plan. Yeah. he still has the same game plan over the last couple turns. He's found a line that it's the same thing he's been doing for like the last dozen turns or so, Lorinda.
Yeah. Yeah, he's got to do it that way. He's not going to get it done with spells. If he can get it low enough, that's the fireball, the Alex Trials that are backups, but Casey's actually in real trouble now. Well, trouble anyway. I don't know how big it is.
Did Yu Ying have lethal the last turn? Am I silly? I might be silly.
I think you're silly.
Alright, I'm probably silly. He had Fireball plus a Zephyrus in hand. There was 6 in play. His opponent was at 17. Correct me if I'm wrong on that. There might not have been 6 in play. I might be mistaken.
Struggling to reconstruct. Must have.
Yeah, it's okay. It's okay. Let's not worry about it. Let's focus on the rest of this match. Excuse me for that. I just wasn't even considering the Zephyrus at that point because I was so locked in on the defensive game plan that I thought Yu Ying was going for. I definitely like the tempo approach that he took. I think it makes a lot more sense than going defensively. I just didn't spot it in time compared to him.
He's so close every turn, but that's the nature of the game. That is what Casey's doing, is keeping it to the best of his ability so that he doesn't die to most things. And Yu Ying is constantly playing around this Apotheosis. This is one of the problems that is going on. If you're wondering why he doesn't just go face and win this race, which he would, Apotheosis is the big spanner in the works.
Yeah, we definitely see Yu Ying playing around a card that just isn't there right now, and it makes a lot of his plays look very silly. Even though if an Apotheosis would come down, it would put a large wrench in Yu Ying's game plan. Oh boy!
Good luck, everybody.
Yep.
Whoever you're supporting, because these probably still favour Yu Ying, but he can definitely clear up.
One more?
Yeah, not enough. Not enough.
That is another Astromancer Solarian.
He's dead on board. But
nope,
then
there's a Flame Ward.
Yeah, exactly.
This is pretty silly, Lorinda.
This is amazing. The last few turns of this match can be interesting, I guess. Normally what's happened by now is, when I was being really down about this match, is that the Mage has run out of stuff and the Priest is just waiting to finish off the last couple of things. But Yu Ying has managed to use the tempo to his advantage. And I must say, it came up as the Priest is only 49% on the Chinese ladder as well. So technically you were right about the 50-50 being better.
And in my mind, I think this matchup, or like the match that we currently have going on right now, is that Yu Ying has a read on a card in Casey's hand that just isn't there. And the game is going on a lot longer because of that. I don't necessarily think that means that Yu Ying is playing incorrectly. You know, maybe there's some argument to be said about whether his handwriting skills need a little bit of work. But, you know, in his mind, maybe he just has it mapped out to where, you know, if there is a Apotheosis in hand, he always wins. But he can also find a line that beats no Apotheosis in hand. And that line ends up being just a lot slower than the guaranteed no Apotheosis hand win.
Yeah, and that's the half I'm not so convinced about. The half where I'm sure he's aware what he's doing. He's chosen to do this knowing full well that there was a good chance he would win just by going face the other time. He hasn't missed that. But for whatever reason, he feels that this way is still better.
For sure. And I mean, another thing to say about the Priest matchup is that in Priest versus Mage, things can go sideways very quickly. You know, there's really no guarantees in the future that, you know, your game plan is going to work and that the Priest isn't going to generate some random card that will, you know, swing them back in. So generally, in my mind, I think taking it slower rather than faster is a good idea.
I do think that Casey has generally been unlucky with his rolls as well. Like, he's drawn a lot of 2 mana and 1 mana, 3 mana cards from the hero power.
Well, this is like kind of the last turn that Casey really can fight back, right? The Cabal Shadow Priest, Acidic Swamp Ooze are doing nothing. Maybe his hero power gets him something good, but even with just this board alone, I think Yu Ying gets there as long as, you know, Casey still finds garbage of his hero power.
Yeah, it's getting to the point I don't even know what he would be looking for that would get him out. Like, repeated good cards is now not an option, which is sometimes the way forward.
Mm-hmm.
Kalagos Frostnova.
It's playing it very slowly. How do you feel about Conjure's Calling here?
Yeah, I like it.
And I imagine it goes on the 10 drop.
Not so clear because you've got 4-1 there.
I think 2 10 drops is better than 2 4 drops.
Sure.
Something to remember is that the initial Karen Bloodhoof is 6, but Bane Bloodhoof, which summons off of Karen because
It's
of
only
WoW
4.
lore, is oh man, that was Casey got really lucky there with the Scarlet Subjugator.
Yeah,
but that was also that one I disagree with, Lorinda. I think that
I think
10
you
drops
convinced
is just infinitely bigger than what could have happened. He ends
well,
up
it's
getting
not
massively
2 10
punished.
drops, right? It's only 1 10 drop versus 2 4 drops, or 1.5 10 drops, because you've got a 10 drop to start with.
Nah,
But the 4 drop was dead.
I think it's 2. 4 damage is not relevant. 12 damage is.
Sure. Okay.
Give me the Deathwing.
Mm-hmm. Oh, Casey going to go for max tempo.
This game is spiraling a little bit out of control. Yu Ying is out of things to do besides Cartoon Defender, Conjurer's Calling, and beyond that, you're looking at a Tempo Alexstrasza, which feels disgusting. I hate to say it, Lorinda, but I really think that Conjurer's Calling on the 10 drop was crucial to win this game.
Sure. Looks like it. And I think I would have gone for the 10 drop. I just don't think it was necessarily as obvious.
I think it was pretty darn obvious.
I wonder if he thought it was a 6
Oh, those
drop.
are huge. That's 14 damage. That's also huge.
Double
That's
Sethic!
reverse 14 damage. Shadow Word Death, another Death here would be great. Shadow Word Ruin would be great. Even a Shadow Madness would be sweet. Apotheosis is big. That's going to kill off the minion.
Oh no, which 9 drops that? I always get this wrong. You're going to have to bail me.
Sorry, what?
The 9 drop that Casey got.
That is Plague of Death. It's very sandy.
Thank
That's
you.
generally my rule. If it's very sandy, it's like they're being dragged into the sand. Do you see how it's like very orange?
Mm-hmm.
So, sand, I think I hate sand, and then I go, yep, Plague of Death. I also hate Plague of Death, so makes a lot of sense in my mind.
Because Mass Resurrection's almost the same picture. It's just them going the other way.
Are you sure? Mass Resurrection has some blue in it.
Yeah, there's a bit of purple in it, and they're slightly bigger people, and it is a little bit darker.
So what you're saying is they're different pictures.
I mean, they're obviously different pictures, but it's a caster's nightmare. 9 drop in a foreign language with the same colour picture that you can only see half of sometimes.
Next thing you're going to say is that Holy Nova looks like Plague of Death. They do actually kind of look similar.
They do, but one's got a big 4 in the corner, one's got a big 9 in the corner, so it's easy.
Right. Actually, that's an upside down 6.
Well, prime number 2, which I assume he won't play, because there's no reason to. It's not going to kill your opponent, and you're not going to kill any minions, so why bother?
Lorinda, you know how I said this game is going sideways?
Mm-hmm.
Now it's kind of going into like the 4th dimension. We're going through different dimensions with this game. There's another Solarian Prime in Casey's hand. I feel like Yu Ying did not capitalize like at 4 different stages this game.
I think that's harsh. I mean, it might be right, but I think there's probably only 2 of them where he made a decision. The others were consequences of the others.
Is that an evocation? That's an evocation.
Mm-hmm.
There's now just 7 other spells that Yu Ying's going to have access to.
But only once, right? So...
What's happening in this game?
This is what happens when 2 people play fairly 50-50 matchups. even though there's like so many random effects thrown in for good measure along the way, this seems to just be the nature of good player versus good player, even if there is random stuff thrown in.
That last one is big. Just getting the clear was the most necessary thing, I'd say, on the 7/7.
Yeah, because he's got another clear available now, so Yu Ying almost out of stuff as far as Casey is aware. We know there's a little bit more punch left than Casey maybe is aware of.
I think Casey has navigated this pretty darn well with what he was given. He was given a lot of cheap minions that don't really affect the board that much in the late game. And I think he capitalized on the errors in Yu Ying's game plan. Scarlet Subjugator was obviously a crazy pickup, but if Yu Ying had just Conjurers calling the Calicos, he would have totally avoided that scenario. That means that Yu Ying would not have to play the Amazing Reno defensively when he had no real reason to. He'd been able to save it for later, stop Casey's board development for the future turns, and it just has snowballed out of control from there. Yu Ying is now on the back foot, which is gross. That is really gross. That is not a position Yu Ying wants to be in at all. He's diverting from the game plan of just playing for minions to this weird, desperate evocation, hopefully pulling off some Pyroblast, Fireball, Frostbolt shenanigans, and that is a way less guaranteed game plan than I think what he could have gone for in the past.
But Casey should never have had these primes. I felt that playing the prime into a mirror turn was a definite mistake as well at the time.
That's definitely an argument that can be made.
I understand that maybe it wasn't. And like all of them that can be, and let's just check this. Double Fireball?
Oh, okay, more spells. The Arcane Breaths here are huge. These are like, besides the double Fireball hand, these are some of the best cards that he could have possibly gotten. I imagine
if he doesn't kill
the magic
Casey,
trick and the secrets are going to come out here. A Pyroblast with a Frostbolt in hand. With another evocation. This game is silly. That's not allowed.
Absolutely nutty.
That's just not allowed, Lorinda. All right, the evocation made more evocations and a Pyroblast. It literally like went infinite.
That's unbelievable.
Dude, Casey got robbed.
I think it's a good job that Casey's camera's not on right now.
I like Yu Ying, but Casey got robbed. Oh boy, this Pyroblast is going to seal Yu Ying the game. Never in doubt, Lorinda.
What did we just watch?
This was the game plan that Yu Ying had all along. He was going to play the route where he would force Casey to play on the front foot, have tempo the entire game, and then make Casey think that Yu Ying was getting desperate. But no, in fact, the evocation was going to pull a Pyroblast, a Frostbolt, 2 Arcane Breaths. The Arcane Breaths were going to pull another evocation and a spell and just lock out the game from there. I think that was a very guaranteed line. I don't think conjuring the Calicos to stop anything else from happening was a good idea. So I think that's my daily dose of sarcasm. I'm not happy about how that game went. But
we got to see Casey at his very best. That's something that I enjoyed about that game. Look, you don't always have to look at the results. You look at the position they got to. And Casey had a little bit of luck along the way as well. You have to in that matchup. There's a lot of effects going on, so you have to have some.
Sure.
I felt that he tiptoed through the minefield pretty well through that entire game, and obviously at the end he was robbed. But I think it's good to see some Casey playing super good Hearthstone again.
Yeah. Moral victory goes to Casey for me on that one. I feel bad for G2 that they're eliminated here, but I think they all played pretty well throughout the series. The only question mark that I had was RDU's gameplay as Rogue versus Mage, where he may have missed the chance to get a lackey for the win. But
there was only bits of micro, right? Yeah, it wasn't huge. It was micro stuff, little bits and pieces. It wasn't like not understanding how the class works or something.
For sure. And the last game was pretty brutal if you're a G2 or a Complexity fan. But props to Casey for playing it well. And props to Yu Ying for figuring out how to win from a very unfavored spot. I think he kind of dug himself into a very large hole and managed to claw his way back out. And a lot of times when you have players that do make a very large mistake, they kind of struggle and crumble under pressure, and they don't really ever find that winning line that can buy them back a chance to, win the series. So Ewing got himself into a very large hole, but he still had that mental fortitude to pull off a win. He did find that cheeky escape mana saber and the evocation to like give himself 10 mana in the hopes of finding a pyroblast. And that's not specifically how the evocation lined up, but it was still a very good setup for what was going to be his only way to win. And yeah, I dislike how the mid game happened, but props to Yu Ying for figuring it out at the very end.
Yeah, it was all coherent. Like sometimes you see people make mistakes and they're just gibbering messes, but he made a conscious decision not to go for the 2-turn kill that would have won him the game. Like it was a choice. It wasn't just and because of that, he was still in the game for a very long time. Whereas if somebody like me did that because I was scared of Apotheosis and just started trading everything, I wouldn't stay in that game for more than 2 or 3 more turns. He had an actual plan as to why he didn't want to go for it. He decided he could win even if there wasn't Apotheosis this way anyway, and was still going to win if there wasn't. So he went for a sensible game plan, but he did end up having to luck out, and I agree with you. I think he made a couple of mistakes along the way. But again, by having a good game plan, your mistakes are mitigated to some degree because you still play good Hearthstone.
And I do want to say that I forgot to mention this in the beginning, that I think his early game plan was excellent. The decision to use the Doomsayer over the Fireball in the beginning is not something I would have spotted. And I think that it was a really brilliant line. So in some areas, I still have a lot of question marks about Yoon's game plan, but the early game, I think, was really well played.
Well, that is G2 eliminated from the tournament, but we do still get one more match today. We get to see if Lucky Future can take on World Elite for that final spot. Well, they can take them on, but can they get it done? So we're just going to take a few more minutes to get back set up, ready for that one, and then we'll be here for the final match of the group stages.